Okay, lessons 14, 15, and 16 are on the back. They're already printed up and they're stapled together, so if you want to grab one on the way out this evening, that'll be the next 3 lessons. I've really enjoyed not only teaching this but putting the material together. I had not put a series together like this before. And obviously we see the benefit of this because we are Christians. And as Christians, we're to be Christ-like. And how do you be Christ-like if you don't know anything about Christ? And we're learning so many things about him, different aspects of his life. And now tonight we're going to be dealing with his betrayal and his trial. And let's not forget this human side of him as he goes through all of this. And glean some lessons, not only just learning all the things that happened, but trying to glean some wonderful attitudes that he exhibited, and not just taking it, taking his blows quietly, but sometimes he would, there were times when he would just speak up. He had rights, and as we're going to be talking about here, because there are times when people would just strike him on the face and he basically is, what'd you do that for? If I've done something wrong, you go ahead and strike me, but I want to know what I did wrong. See, there's nothing wrong with exerting yourself and defending yourself as far as with words are concerned. In other words, having your rights. And so I want us to be mindful of all those aspects as we go through. So I'm going to give assignments. Nancy, I'm giving you Judas. I'm giving you question number 1. I got you over in Luke chapter 22. Dustin, I've got you with John 18. It's just 10 and 11. And Christopher, I've got you John 18. Well, you got 3 through 9, so you got a longer reading. But that's okay. You're young, and we got to take advantage before you leave on Friday. So the question number 1 was, when Jesus was arrested, tell what he said to the different people that were there. And so there were different encounters. Different people were present on this night. And we're just noticing some of the comments that were made. Luke 22 and verse 48, Nancy.
He says, but Jesus said to him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?
Now, this is we might say this is a little odd. What did Jesus already say when he, when he was gathered around and washed the feet and at that instituted the Lord's Supper? Well, and then, of course, he left just before the Lord's Supper. But what had he already said to him? Yeah. Here, and he actually told Judas, go do what you have to do, right? And he left, and then Jesus, of course, instituted the Lord's Supper. So Judas comes to him, and he says, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? Well, it seems like a silly question. What do you think Jesus, why say that?
Maybe to see what a reaction he can get.
Anything else? What you think? Well, yes. In other words, it's almost like when Peter betrayed him, and after the 3rd time, the cock crowed, he looks at him, right? Remember, he looked at Peter. Remember Peter's reaction? He started to cry. I could just see, and you guys had that discussion with Tony, and I really feel bad because I got ahead of myself because listening to your program, to the lesson, you guys got down and you were just down to question number 8, and you ran out of time, so we needed to finish that question too. But I'll probably get a chance to come back to that. But one of the things, because remember the question that you guys discussed last week was, why would Judas say, is it I? And you guys answered it. Remember, amongst a lot of answers, you guys said, well, to throw off suspicion. If you want some people to think that you're innocent, is just say, is it me? Because they'd say, well, if it was him, he'd know it and wouldn't ask. And so it throws off suspicion. One of the things that I had on my outline as a possible answer too is, sometimes you say, is it me, in the sense where, well, I know what I did, but I'd hardly call it a betrayal. That might be a little harsh, right? Like some people today would say, okay, I may have done that, but I don't know if I call it sin. So it's that sometimes we try to lessen it, the seriousness of it. And here he is, as soon as he sees him, he comes up to him, are you betraying the Son of Man, to me that would be like a shot right between the eyes of reality of what you are doing on this occasion. And so Jesus just, he didn't keep his mouth shut, is my point. Yeah, I mean, he would just speak up, and here's the one that was accusing him, Misty.
Not only that, but it's with a kiss, which is a very common greeting that you would give. So it's not like he's just saying, oh, that's him over there. It's like a personal greeting that he's giving him.
And how empty is that, right? I mean, it's one thing to just nod to somebody you really don't care for. But to go up and give them that kiss, which they greeted one another with a holy kiss. It's supposed to be a holy kiss, right? Now, when you look at that in Romans 16:16, this is a free point, doesn't cost anything. I'm on a tangent. But Romans 16:16, when they say greet one another with a holy kiss, the emphasis was not so much on the kiss as it was on the holiness of it, the purity of it. When you shake somebody's hand, you mean it. Okay? That purity needs to be there. And look at the facade here. You're coming up to him and you greet him with a kiss, and it was a kiss of betrayal. I mean, how empty, how shallow can you get, Janet?
Well, and I may have my events backwards in my head, but did he tell the Pharisees that he would greet him with a kiss before this time, or was it after that? You know, that the one that you're supposed to take off to kill.
Well, I think that was all part. Yeah, I think the before.
Was that before this?
I mean, yeah, because they needed to know.
Okay.
And that's why we're going to get into this in just a few moments in number C here, which is really cool that Christopher's about to read. I really like that.
But Jesus wouldn't know that that's what he told the Pharisees, that the one I greet the kiss. I mean, that's just kind of, to me, it's almost like a prophecy. I don't know. I mean,
Well, but again, remember, he knew about it ahead of time.
Well, he did. Yeah. I know.
And to me, I think the lesson is for us. I really think it's a great lesson. I don't want to get bogged down and not even get off to question number 1 tonight. But it's a great lesson for us in the sense where, does our Lord know genuine and fake worship?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, seriously, does he know if we're just pretending or play acting as a Christian? I mean, absolutely. It just reminds me of Revelation chapter 3 and verse 1. He told the church at Sardis, you have a name that's alive, but you're dead. In other words, you're not living up to the name. You want to call yourself a Christian, go ahead, but you could be dead and not living up to it. And so I think there's where the great lessons come as far as to Judas. I'm on to you, I am aware of it, and hopefully create some remorse. Oh, by the way, did it work? Was there any remorse? There's a lot of remorse. So much so, he goes and hangs himself, right? And we'll talk about that. John 18:10 and 11, Dustin.
So Jesus said to Peter, put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given?
Deja vu, all over again. What did he do with when Jesus wanted to wash his feet?
Didn't want him to.
They wanted to, right? And we talked about well, did he have, if you're going to defend him, did he have, was he sincere in what he was trying to do? Yeah, you're greater than me. I don't want you washing my feet. And then you have no part of me. And of course, then he said, wash my whole body. What's the positive here? What's the positive here that Dustin just read? Anything positive?
Trying to stop what's happening.
You're defending the Lord. You're defending the Lord. And I'm going to tell you something, folks. How is it that a Christian today can defend the Lord and be sinning? Tell me how you can defend the Lord, but you're sinning today.
Your attitude and the way you do it.
Example? Somebody help her out. Misty?
I've seen situations where Christians react, whether they're correcting another Christian or an unbeliever, in such a way that it turns the Lord away from God. And when you turn somebody away from God, I think you're sinning. You may be defending the Lord, but you've lost a soul.
Dan, did you agree?
Different positive.
Okay.
sort of what Misty said, when you belittle someone to that point. Okay?
Can you even think of an area where, like carnally, like with a weapon? Can you think of anything? I mean, could you threaten somebody physically? Yeah, I mean, seriously, I mean, is the Lord proud of that? No, He's not. When He was reviled and not reviled in return, you and I, vengeance belongs to the Lord. If you're saying, you know, if somebody comes in here and he's just saying, you guys are teaching false doctrine. Well, we took care of that guy. Yeah, no, not good, Chuck. Not good. You know, that's not how you handle somebody who disagrees with you. We do not engage in carnal warfare. Are there religious groups that are very militant that way? And we have to be careful that we're not like that. If somebody doesn't want to study with me, what do I tell them? See you later. Okay. I'm not here to push. You know, I'm not going to force anybody. I might ask them a few times just as a reminder, hey, you know, look, if you want to study, door's always open. And I'll do that. Guys that I've met a couple of years ago, and I'll keep in touch with them, and I'll text them. I've done it. I did it when I was up in Olney. You know, you get some time in the morning, and I just flipping through my text. You know, I see the names there, and I'll go, oh man, I haven't talked to that guy in a while. Hey man, I just want to remind you if you ever want to study, just like. But to threaten somebody and to cut off their ear, what did Jesus do?
He healed him.
Okay. Is anything interesting about that for you guys? Anything interesting about that?
Miracle.
Yeah. How would you feel if you were that guy that got your ear cut off? Man, I'm not arresting this guy. You know, seriously. I mean, I don't know whether the guy just went, oh, okay, all right, arrest him. If he did that, I mean, there's a guy who's dedicated to his job. But seriously, I mean, here Jesus heals him. And that should tell you something. Again, we're learning about Jesus. Not only we were focusing on Peter, let's focus on the Lord here for a moment. And here he is. They're coming to arrest him. Had Jesus done anything wrong? No. They're coming to arrest him. Jesus has not done anything, or Jesus hasn't done anything wrong. Are the people coming to arrest him followers of him? No, they're not followers of him. Who is a follower of him? Peter. And who does he end up rebuking? The follower. You know, and you can almost get that attitude when we come together as a church, and somebody might say, Chuck, you've been preaching, man. It's stepping on my toes. Can you just, like, focus on the people that aren't even here? Well, I'm supposed to be preaching to all of us, me and everybody else, but I can't preach to people who aren't here. I can't. Well, they're watching, but I can't do that. So we learn that Jesus did it himself, that he's teaching his followers. You say, well, Jesus, quit rebuking me. If anybody needs to be taught, it's these people that have come to arrest you. Well, they're in the world. You're not. You're supposed to be a follower of me. Therefore, you are to act a certain way. This is why we are trying to mold ourselves to be more like Christ. Every time we come together is to grow, to get stronger. It isn't to say, leave me alone. Focus on those people who really need it. Well, if you're learning anything, Jesus is constantly trying to mold his people. It's called growth, maturity, getting stronger, being edified. And again, so many great lessons from this. Anybody got any other comments of Judas and Peter? Now, Dan, the floor is yours.
We've been asking for the positives.
Yeah.
Just a minute ago. I mean, I think you can make an argument that this is a positive in Jesus' behalf here. Because there have been a lot of instances up to this point where people are trying to make him out to be something he's not, right? An earthly king and want to follow him in a way that he's not supposed to be followed. And we see, really this is another example of this, right? I would, can't say, but I would expect that, the temptation on his part to accept that kind of treatment as he's getting closer to the betrayal and the arrest of the death that he knows is coming would be getting stronger over time. So there's perhaps an argument to be made here that seeing him correct Peter and talk again about this big picture purpose for why all of this has to happen is a reinforcement on his part, that he's sticking to that plan, even though we see him on the cross that he wished for something else, but all the way through he's accepting it and sticking to it. This is another example of that.
I like it, Dan, because let's keep our timeline in, right? What you guys just discussed last week. What had he just done prior to being arrested? What had he just done? Been praying. Kind of prayer.
Let this cup pass from me.
Yeah. It's like, couldn't you stay awake an hour? I mean, just couldn't you stay awake and watch? I mean, this was a big deal to him. And he rebukes them and great sweats of blood, like blood, and it was, I mean, there's no inflection in the Bible, but if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. I think he's the human side of him. If it's possible, let this cup pass from me. And as Dan talks about, now they come to arrest him. Peter, will you put that up? Well, what got into you? I'm more determined than ever. Okay? Jesus himself teaches us, guys, you're going to go through those highs and lows in your life. But those lows help prepare you for some other lows that might come so you can handle those, whatever struggles they might be. And that's why we need to be growing. That's why we need to be feeding on the Word, because those lows will come. Your life will not be perfect, so to speak, as far as free from persecution, free from hardships and difficulties. They'll come. And what you need when that comes is you need your faith. And Jesus is teaching us about that, Misty.
Just one of the other positives from Peter is his passion. So many times we see where Peter's very passionate and he reacts without thinking. And, I know I do that. I think that's very common for us. But I think a warning for us as a general is when you let that passion allow you to make a decision that's not right. And how many times do we see people, doing stuff for Jesus or in his name that's not what he wants?
Okay, I like it. That's what I love about Bible studies, guys. You get it. You have to know the big role you guys play in this. I mean, you guys are thinking about stuff that others haven't thought about, and we're all adding to it. And I love this point because the positive with him, you say, well, at least he was willing to do it. How many would even do what Peter did? How many would even do that? Now, he had zeal, right? But it wasn't according to knowledge. And if you sit there and say that, well, I would sooner have knowledge and no zeal, no, that's not good either. And so at least learn from that. Take that passion, which Paul did, right? I mean, he took that zeal of going into people's homes, dragging them up, Christians out of their homes, casting them into prison. He took all that zeal for what he thought was right, and he just channeled it in the right direction. Was he more on fire? Well, he was on fire before. He's even more so now because the Lord, knowing what he had was right. And I think it's just a powerful lesson for us, and I appreciate that point. That hopefully, that when, and you need courage to do that. If somebody takes the Lord's name in vain, have you ever said, that really bothers me? Or you say, well, Chuck, there's certain circumstances. You're just, you're standing in line to get tickets or in a grocery store and somebody says something and they cuss and they take the Lord's name and they say the name Jesus Christ, and you could just say, I love him. What are you talking about? Well, you just said my Savior's name. I love him. Just want to balance things out here. They probably look weird at you. But I'm just saying, if you're in a situation where you have to defend the Lord, you have to defend your faith, would you? Would you do it? Would you have the courage? Great lesson there. Okay, Christopher, it's up to you now. You've got 3 through 9. Sorry, guys, didn't pass over you, but I already handed out assignments before you walked in. Go ahead, Christopher.
When Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that would come upon him, went forward and said to them, Whom were you seeking? They answered and said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said to them, I am he. And Judas, who betrayed him, also stood with them. Now when he said to them, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. Then he asked them again, Whom are you seeking? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I have told you that I am he. Therefore, if you seek me, let these go their way, that the saying might be fulfilled which he spoke, of those whom you gave me, I have lost none.
Okay. And I could have put the troops in front of Peter here in ABC on our sheet because this is chronologically first. Okay. Man, some interesting things happen here. And again, focusing on Jesus, what are some things that stand out to you here? There's just some really cool things. What stands out to you in that reading? Anything? Misty?
The number of people they brought.
Yeah, okay. Okay. I mean, how many do you need, right?
Well, a whole cohort. You know,
They did?
a lot of soldiers.
Yeah. Nancy?
Came forward, he said,
Well, I like that aspect, you know. So, who are you looking for? Now, you and I, since they don't know who they're looking for, what might you be tempted to say?
He's not here.
Yeah, I haven't seen him. You know, where's Chuck? I don't know. You know, somebody comes in here with a gun. Where's Chuck? He left. You know, you might be tempted, but what I like, Jesus is just like, who are you looking for? Jesus. And he says, well, I'm he. By the way, what happened when he told them that I'm he? They what?
Back away.
Yeah, they fell backwards. They fell back. Any possible reason why that happened?
They're scared? I don't know.
I think they were stunned that he, that he admitted, here I am.
Yeah. When somebody you're coming to arrest comes out and says that's you're showing some kind of attitude. What kind of attitude? That taking them by surprise.
Confidence.
Very confident. Do you think they'd heard anything about this Christ, by the way? Mark?
I think this key is what was falling back from the reaction that took place because they probably really didn't know who they were looking for. Probably.
Not knowing who.
Who, particularly. And
Right.
when they found out, they think maybe this is not such a good idea.
Well, getting back to Misty's point, because Misty was Jesus' reputation was there, right? I don't know if they knew a lot about him, but again, maybe because Misty wondered, why did they bring so many with him? Well, they've heard some things. You know, the miracles that Jesus performed were not done in a corner. They were not done in secret. And so his reputation was known. Matter of fact, we're going to read, who knows, maybe next month when we get to the end of this paper. But there are some soldiers when Jesus dies. Since I did the 3 question sheets for the next 3 classes at the back, so I know it was on one of them that I put the question in there. But when Jesus dies, I mean, when you have a soldier saying, surely this is the Son of God, you know, it's like they'd heard some things. And perhaps taking people for fear of what he was able to do. Misty?
How many times have they gone to get arrested before and he walks right through their midst and they never seen him? So I'm sure part of that large group was to make sure that he didn't escape.
Yeah, and then, of course, when he is arrested and stands before them, he says, you know, why the big deal? Because you could have arrested me anytime, and you didn't do it. Tony?
They didn't confirm it with Judas. You know, he didn't give Judas the opportunity to say, yes, that is him. You know.
Did you notice in this reading? Did you notice in this reading where Judas is?
He's with them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, guys. I mean, we've already read and talked about that, where Judas betrays him. And it's one thing to betray him with a kiss and then just say, okay, I'm out of here. But to stand back with those that are attacking Jesus, I mean, how terrible that is. Again, there's been lessons that we've preached on of how Jesus felt when Peter had to, denied him 3 times. What Judas did to him. Yes, he was the Son of God, but he was also that man part, that human part to him. And having people turn their back on him, it's a lesson for us, guys, because there may be times in your life where people will turn their back on you. People that you never thought would turn their back on you. How are you going to handle that? Well, you handle it like Jesus did. You keep your faith in check. And so he again asks them who they're seeking, and then we move on down. And then it says in verse 9, I like this part where he says in verse, well, let me ask you, what do you like about verse 8? And I really appreciate this. It's something that you would do, Misty.
I'm the one you want, let the rest of it go.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody comes in the house and he breaks in, you'd say, let him go, let him go. I mean, you know, you come after me. I like the idea of leave them alone. He's still, guys, he's still mindful of others. You know, we're going to talk about when he's on the cross and say, you know, he's saying, don't want to steal the thunder from next week's class, because next week's class we're going to be talking about the 7 statements he made while he was hanging on the cross. One of them being, you know, talking to John, you know, and talking about his mom, and somebody has to take care of him when he's gone. Jesus, you're dying on the cross. What are you doing thinking about other people? You know, and in this situation, to be mindful of others, you have to love that selfless attitude of him and being mindful of others. And so, and then he says, and that the same might be fulfilled which he spoke, of those whom you gave me, I have lost none. And so they didn't bother with them, by the way. They didn't bother with them. And we're going to be noticing some more fulfillments of some of the prophecies of when Jesus hung on the cross. Okay, all right. One question done in a half hour. Not bad. But it just goes to show you the benefit of feeding on the Word and making the application for our own lives. And guys, again, I'm just trying to stress, we're not here just learning this like an encyclopedia, like you would in going to school. These lessons are to help mold us and help us to grow and get closer to the Lord, because we're trying to be like Him. Okay, question number 2. And Warren, I'm going to have you read. You're over in Luke 22 is where you're going to be. And just FYI, guys, if you have your sheets, you probably already figured out question number 5, that it wasn't chapter 22, it was chapter 23. You probably went a little crazy there. There's nothing in chapter 22. Yeah, it was in chapter 23. Anyways, question number 2 was, as soon as Christ was arrested, what did they do to him when they brought him to the high priest's house? Now, Warren's going to read Luke 22, verse 54, and then he's going to read 63 through 65. Warren?
Having arrested him, they led him and brought him into the high priest's house. But Peter followed at a distance. Now the men who held Jesus mocked him and beat him. Having blindfolded him, they struck him on the face and asked him, saying, prophesy, who is the one who struck you? And many other things they blasphemously spoke against him.
All right. Some of this stuff is just not fun to read. You know, when we think about what Jesus, you know, we always talk about him hanging on the cross, which is terrible. Okay, I don't want to minimize the actual crucifixion. That was like the climax of all that he had been going through. But what led up to his death and the things that he had to go through is just terrible. And so here, so what did they do to him? Guys, again, remind ourselves, what did they do to him when they got to the house?
They mocked him and beat him.
They beat him, okay? And that wasn't a light beating. What else did they do to him?
Blindfolded him.
And?
Struck him on the face.
Blindfolded. So when you're blindfolded, do you see it coming? Let me tell you, you got to picture this. You know, I don't need a movie to depict what was going on here. I can visualize what's going on here, you know, rather clearly. It just makes it so graphic that they would blindfolded him, and you can just see him just not knowing what's coming, and then slapped, And then they've been mocking him, and they turn around and they say, well, who was it? Now, what might we have been tempted to do? You know, in other words, you're going to go through with it. You're going to go through with the crucifixion. You're not going to not do that. But you might have been tempted to do a little something right here. What's that? Fight back. I was thinking, just a little, just something little, just slip out the guy's name who just struck you. Okay, tell us who did it. Malchus. Just let something slip out there to let them know that you've got the power, okay? You know, like the Clark Kent, you know, you don't want to reveal who you really are, but just do a little something to let them know that I'm still in control. But he doesn't do that is the point. He doesn't even let the guy's name slip out. And it would have been so, I mean, I know Hollywood glamorizes getting even. And it sucks me in. It sucks me in. Because when I see a movie where somebody's finally going to get back at what they did to him, you're kind of like, get him. Let them have. You know, they want you to be that like that. And there's something satisfying in that. And we have to understand that it isn't lasting. It isn't lasting. You may try to be vindictive and do something hateful. But Jesus stays in control, and that's the lesson for us. He could have slipped out the guy's name. But again, he did all of this and didn't do anything wrong. And remember, this is before he's even like tried. You know, whatever happened to the you're innocent till proven guilty kind of thing. And you say, well, Chuck, we don't even have that in our society because you're arrested, put in jail, and then you got to go to trial. So what do you call that, being put in jail? That hardly seems like being innocent. Well, in this sense, we notice that it wasn't just that they arrested him and put him in jail and waited for the trial. They grabbed him and they beat him and they treated him terribly and they mocked him. They made fun of him. And remember, he didn't do anything wrong. Didn't do a thing wrong. And this is what Jesus did for us, by the way. Did for us. Anything else for question number 2, guys, that you want to add? Okay, Tina, I've given you 22, Luke 22, 66 through 71. And now we're going to explain what unfolded when Jesus stood before the chief priests and the scribes, 66 through 71.
And as soon as it was day, the elders of the people and the chief priests and the scribes came together and led him into their council, saying, Art thou the Christ? Tell us. And he said, If I tell you, you will not believe. And if I ask you, you will not answer me, nor let me go. Hereafter shall the Son of Man sit on the right hand of the power of God. Then said they all, Art thou then the Son of God? And he said to them, You say that I am. And they said, What need we any further witness? For we ourselves have heard every one mouth.
All right. There we go. So, now Jesus gives us a little bit of insight of what you can say. You don't have to be a timid little doggy. Okay? When they say, Who are you? What does Jesus... I mean, he just asserts himself here. What does he say? First of all, are you Jesus? What's he say?
You won't believe me.
I tell you, you're not going to listen to me. And he knows that. And sadly, you know, they know that. Okay? It doesn't matter what he says. And guys, you're going to find yourselves talking with people, defending. I've talked with people. It didn't matter what I said. Where in the Bible does it say, oh, well, where does it say? See, it doesn't matter. It's like I've told you guys before. If any one of us here performed a miracle, CNN came and you did another one, then what would happen? They want another one, then what? They want another one, and they want another one, and they want another one. I don't listen to what you have to say. And that was what was happening with Jesus when he fed the 5,000, right? You know, he fed the 5,000 miraculously, and the next day they sought him, and he said, You seek me not because of the miracle. That should have impressed you to listen to me, but you're seeking me to get your bellies filled. And so we're not going to entice people to get their bellies filled here. By the way, if you have to bring him in with cake and ice cream, what's going to keep them? Cake and ice cream. All right? But if they come for the truth, we're just going to keep giving them the truth. Jesus knew his audience here. And he told it right. He says, if I tell you, you will by no means believe. And if I also ask you, you will by no means answer me or let me go. Now, when he says here, and if I ask you, what would Jesus possibly ask them? Tell me, what would Jesus possibly ask them?
If they thought that he was the Son of God?
Maybe. That's possible. Okay. Remember, he's been arrested. What have I done? What crime have I committed? Because that's been the whole thing all through this trial that we're going to notice. We're not even there yet to all of it, especially when he stands before Pilate, then Herod, then Pilate again. And that's going to be question number 4. We're only on question number 3. But we're noticing here is that, let me get back to my reading here. Yeah, well, Jesus he knows he could ask them questions, but if they're not going to be honest, it's not going to do any good. And so he knows his fate. He knows his fate. He knows the kind of people he's up against. And for you and I, if people don't want to listen, there's no sense. But even though he knows this, he asserts to them, he says in verse 69, he says, hereafter the Son of Man will sit on the right hand of the power of God. So you're not listening to me, but guess what? I'm going to tell you the truth anyways. I mean, you're not going to believe it, but I'm just going to tell you the truth. Which tells me sometimes when you're falsely accused, if you're ever falsely accused, what is the only thing at your disposal? When you are falsely accused, Christopher, if you're falsely accused, what's the only thing you really have?
Your word.
Your word. Dan, or do you want to push the button? One of you guys. Yeah, what you have is you have your dignity, you have your word. So you just tell it. Even though you know that you're in a situation where people might not believe you, say your piece. Stand up. Because you're in the right. Okay? You're in the right. And Jesus had every right to say this because this was going to happen. Now when he said that, they came back and said, are you then the Son of God? Now they already asked him that, right? They already asked him that. Now it gets to the point, and I'm going to tell you something. This is going to happen. It's happened to me in Bible studies. So if I say to you, I say, Brian, are you telling me that baptism is necessary for salvation? Your response would be, usually it would be what?
Well, the answer is yes.
You would
Point him to the...
You would say, here's what the Bible says, right? Yeah. So you're telling me baptism is necessary for salvation. You know what? I'm going to get to the point where he goes, yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. Now, I'm not telling you that I've said, that I came up with that doctrine, but, if I'm going to give an answer for the hope that's within me, I'm going to tell you what I believe. I'm going to tell you why I believe it, but I'm going to tell you what I believe. I believe baptism is necessary for salvation based upon these passages of Scriptures. So you're telling me. So these people, I know, are you the Son of God? You're not going to listen to me. And so they asked him again, and Jesus already said, you're not going to listen to me. But then when they said, are you the Son of God? So he says to them, you rightly say that I am. What you've said is true. That's what I am. Now, obviously, they didn't want to hear it. Okay. You're telling them something. So my question, why were they asking? See, we haven't talked about that. Jesus knows they're not going to listen. So tell me, why are they asking?
Just to see what reaction they can get out of him.
Possibly. Misty, then answer.
Since they don't believe he's the Son of God and they can get him to admit it, they can accuse him of blasphemy and then having reason to condemn him.
People look for reasons to despise you. Okay? And so sometimes they'll turn the truth on you. That's all that they have. All they can do is use your faith against you. And you know what this reminds me of? We've got a couple minutes here. We'll start number 4 next week. But this reminds me of, oh, come on, it was right there a moment ago. When all they had to do, the character was, it was an Old Testament character. You might help me out here, guys. An Old Testament character, and the only way that they could get him, I got it, Daniel. Okay. Remember, Daniel was thrown in the lion's den? Remember, he was so loyal to the king, and they said, we can't get him on anything. He's loyal to the king on anything. So what did they decide that they could get him on?
His prayer life.
They have to get him with his godliness. They're going to use his godliness because they know he's going to pray every day, okay? And so he's going to stick to that. And so if somebody makes a law that you can't confess that Jesus is the Christ, they're going to get you and say, is Jesus the Christ? You know, so there you go. They're going to use that against you. When you stand up for what is right, they're going to use your faith against you. So learn from Jesus. Don't be surprised when this happens. When you say, why are they attacking me? When people do not like righteousness, they're going to attack righteousness. And they're going to make it, seriously guys, I mean, you might get in a vulnerable situation where you're in a crowd of people and somebody knows you and doesn't like you. He's going to say, hey, what do you think about those 2 ladies over there that just kissed each other? What do you think about those 2 men over there that are holding hands? You're in a crowd and they say it loudly. Whoa. You know, they want people to turn on you. They might throw, you know, I'm just saying it may never happen, but I'm just saying you can see how people could use that to injure you, to try to hurt you, to persecute you. And because you're such a good person, they can't find any fault in you, so what they'll do is they'll try to attack using your faith to get people to turn against you. And that's exactly what we have right here with Jesus. Confessing who he was, you guys mentioned it. Once you say that, man, then that seals the deal for us. That's all we have to hear. And so from that time on, we know that they wanted to do to Jesus. Okay, so we're going to pick up point number 4, Lord willing, next week. And we'll go from there. Appreciate your comments, guys. Good stuff. Somebody's got to remind me. Yeah.
Did you work out there and do that? I started that. Finished everything. Got started. Went there. Did it all hold out pretty good? Yeah, it looks good. You ordered it to dirt.
Yeah, they will lose no later than off.
Or like, yeah. It looks good. There's a couple of problems, but it's probably
I'm not ruined.
You gotta remind me. Somebody's gotta remind me.
invitation for us in just a moment. Go ahead and turn to 714. We will be singing that after Justin delivers the invitation for us tonight. 714. Before that, though, we'll go ahead and flip to 118. We will sing that now. 118. Count your blessings. When upon life's billows you are tempest tossed, when you are discouraged thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. Are you ever burdened with the load of care? Does the cross seem heavy you are called to bear? Count your many blessings, every doubt will fly, and you will be singing as the days go by. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. So amid the conflict, whether great or small, do not be discouraged, God is over all. Count your many blessings, angels will attend, helping comfort give you to your journey's end. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done.
If you'd like to take your Bibles out and turn to John chapter 15, I'll be reading from there in just a moment. John chapter 15, and I'll be starting in verse 12. I think that was a good song on Dan's part to lead into kind of what I want to talk about, which is the topic of love and the fact that Christ loved us so much he gave his life for us. So I'm going to read now John 15, starting in verse 12. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and appointed you, that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These things I command you, so that you will love one another. And just a few points I want to make from that short passage. Number one, the fact that Christ did love us so much that he gave his life for us. So that right there, is the big ticket. We all have the opportunity of heaven because of that. And then another thing, he goes on to say that there's no greater love than the fact that someone is willing to give their life for you. And I think that, shows just how much love Christ had for every single one of us. And that is an awesome, awesome feeling. Another thing is, he goes on to say that we're no longer his servants, and he calls us his friends. That's another great comfort and great thing that I take away from this passage, is that not only did Christ love us, he has that relationship with us in his mind enough to call us his friend, and that's just awesome. And then just to kind of finish up here, he goes on to say, we didn't choose him, but I chose you. He appointed us to do his will, do his Father's will. And, going back to what I started with, we have that opportunity of heaven because of him, because of his love, because of his sacrifice. So if any of you are struggling tonight, if you're already a Christian and you need help coming back, if you're not a Christian and you want to become one, we have this opportunity now as we stand and sing.
When we walk with the Lord in the light of his word, what a glory he sheds on our way. While we do his good will, he abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. Not a shadow can rise, not a cloud in the skies, but His Son quickly drives it away. Not a doubt nor a fear, not a sign or a tear can harm while we trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. Not a burden we bear, not a sorrow we share, but our toil He doth richly repay. Not a grief nor a loss, not a frown nor a cross, but it's blessed if we trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. Then in fellowship sweet, we will sit at His feet, or will walk by His side in the way. What He says we will do, where He sends we will go. Never fear, only trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. Dustin for his invitation tonight. Just a good reminder for each of us here, as teachers, all of our Bible classes as well. It's hard for me to sing that song and not think of Mitch. But Mitch saying that he didn't want any kind of a funeral or anything for him was a very Mitch thing to do. He didn't have to know him very well to know that he was an extremely humble man. But all the same, it's certainly sad to hear of his passing. If you had, you almost had to have been in town before River Ridge was started to have known Mitch when he was really healthy. He was really at his full strength after he retired, because he became sick not long really after River Ridge was started. He was sick in an ongoing, serious kind of way that diminished him physically. But if, I'm not the only person here who could attest that even as many years as he was ill, and for some of you that may be all that you really knew him as. All those years that he had been sick, he always had a kind word for everybody he met. His faith was one that never outwardly wavered. He was always still there for his family, still there for his wife, still focused on others, and did all those things. So a good example for all of us. Perhaps not unlike Betty a few weeks back. I can say for myself, I'm certainly sorry to hear of his passing. As Chris, his own son said, it's a relief in that his earthly suffering has ended, and we have confidence that he is in a better place now. So I certainly want to remember the Legate family this evening. As far as other thoughts this evening before we close with prayer. I spoke to James briefly. He said he was feeling a little under the weather and wasn't going to be out tonight. Is there anything else that needs to be made mention of?
Jennifer, keep her in the prayers. She's admitted in ICU yesterday, so she's having kidney failure at this time. So if you would keep remembering her.
And with the sadness, the balance. The baby's due any time, so Debbie let us know.
So, several things to be praying for this week. I failed to check who was Tony with us. Well, okay. If there's nothing else, Tony will dismiss us in the closing prayer.
That's right. Our Heavenly Father, we're indeed thankful for this opportunity we've had to come together with fellow Christians and study another portion of thy word. And we pray that everything that was said and done here this evening was done in accordance to thy will. We are indeed thankful for the love we have for one another. We pray that we never take that for granted. We pray that you will always be with us and help us be Christians. All of us are indeed saddened by the loss of our fellow brother Mitch. We are indeed thankful for the opportunity and time we've had to spend with him here upon your earth. We pray that you be with his family as they mourn the loss of their husband and their father, and of course be with us as we mourn the loss of our brother. We pray that you'll be with Jennifer and the doctors that are watching over her, and pray that it be thy will that you'll comfort her and return her back to a portion of health in which she can enjoy her daily life. We pray that you be with Chuck and Debbie and their family as they prepare to bring a new life into this world. We pray that it be thy will that all goes well, and that mother and baby will both be healthy in the delivery. We ask that you go with us now throughout this hour, be our everybody guest. And it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
I know you wrote separate.
Look her up. She started to really stay away.
We get the fish too. We bring the fish out of the outside. We can bring the fish back over to our house.
not all of you, right? There's lots of people and there's babies. You can play with them.